Next, from Rend Lake College in Ina, Illinois, Robert Bauer of the Illinois Geological Survey gives an address at a conference on fracking. He reviews the concerns that environmentalists have raised over the practice and compares that to objective studies and the experience of other states where fracking has been practiced. This runs about 30 minutes.
Morning. This is going to be an overview going from drilling through possible contamination and studies that have been done throughout the United States. The director, Don McKay, is also, along with myself, were involved in the legislative process. And we've tapped into a lot of our experts in the Geological Survey. We bring forward just service, research and service, and have no regulatory responsibility. I'm going to go through the kind of the entire process quickly. A lot of details are also in the Oil and Gas Act and in the new Hydraulic Fracturing Act. Hydraulic fracturing has been used for a lot of things for a very long time, for over a century, for coal-bed methane recovery, disposal wells in bedrock, underground gas storage, some water wells, breaking up stiff soils for taking out contamination, hard rock underground mining, and geothermal wells out west. They do a lot of that to get energy development. The hydraulic fracturing was first an experiment in 1947, commercial operations in 1949. Massive hydraulic fracturing was done. It started in the late 70s and the 80s. This is over a million gallons for each one of those operations. And there's estimated that over a million hydraulically fractured sections, those stages, have taken place in horizontal wells in the United States and over 2 million in the world. Horizontal wells in the United States first were around in the 1930s, common by the 1970s. This is an estimate, over 40,000 of these in the United States in the past 60 years. Some of the concerns associated with this are with the hydraulic fracturing fluid, water use. Where are these unconventional resources for the shale oils and gases, seismicity, and groundwater contamination? Let's take a look at, there's a lot of common elements to both the vertical wells and the horizontal wells. Our groundwater down in the southern part of the state, outside of the surface reservoirs, are located about 50 to 200 feet down. The first surface casing that goes down 100 feet below the fresh water layer. That's drilled, casing put down, cement is pumped up around the outside of the casing. The next casing going down is intermediate casing, and that's the same thing. Drill a hole, drop the casing in, bring in cement around the outside, up around the outside of the casing to the surface. And then there's also another casing that goes down through the production, down into the production zone for both of these. Kind of just give you a visual on what some of these look like, and a lot of the casing steel is picked according to the site conditions. And they are then cemented in place. And there are several different testing methods here with that, and they are dictated in both of the acts. A number of states have found that there have been some problems with these ceilings for about 1 to 3% of the wells, and subsequent action is required to take care of those problems. In a vertical well, if you're going to perforate the casing here to go into a conventional resource of oil and gas and limestone or sandstone, shape charges shoot holes through that casing to get into those formations. So a tool is dropped, and shape charges are shot through the casing into those formations. If it's going to be hydraulically fractured, roughly in the neighborhood of about 10 to 15% of those vertical wells are hydraulically fractured to bring out the product. So there's pressurized water, sand, and chemicals open and extend these fractures through that formation. Again, this has been used since 1947. There's millions of wells been fractured in the United States. Routine use of water fluid in Illinois is from about 8,000 to 12,000 gallons of water. There has been one well just recently in Indiana that used 1 million gallons in a vertical well, and they probably went in and did multiple horizons in that particular well. When we talk about kind of the Illinois basin, we work with looking at Indiana, Kentucky, and Illinois. There, in Illinois itself, there's been about almost close to 200,000 oil wells drilled in the state. And we're looking back at the records in the past 30 years, about 20,000 of those have been hydraulically fractured, virtually all of those in conventional wells. These green areas are areas where we have our oil and gas fields. We take a closer look in here in Lawrence County. That's 6 miles by 6 miles. But these little black dots here in the green area where the oil resource is located, those are the production wells, and also wells that the water and oil come out for the production. And there's a large percentage of that is water that's put back in the formation for in injection wells. Let's take a look at the horizontal well construction in a shale oil gas type setting. People talk about a formation, a shale type formation, but pretty much in those formations are the area of that's the high organic rich layer, and that's where the industry is going to go after. These things are typically very dark black colored because of the organic material, and also the process of going through and heating these through geological time kind of dries them out either from water or chemically, and a lot of fractures develop in those black shales. And they are natural joint fractures that develop through that time period, and regionally they are in the same direction. And this is what the industry is after by putting in the borehole that crosses as many of these as possible. And this is where the hydraulic fracturing takes place in trying to open those up. So just taking a look at a shale sequence here, you see all these little joint patterns in here that are natural, and we see a lot of these joints and high density of these in the shales, and in other overlying rocks, they're very dissimilar. There's a lot less in some of the overlying rocks. Also, fracture and joints developments go up and many times stop at the interface with another layer. All wells are not hydraulically fractured, even within horizontal wells. Some of them are naturally producing. We have horizontal wells producing in the state of Illinois. Same thing takes place in the casing, perforate the casing, start hydraulic fracturing, and what you're doing is pushing that water and the chemicals into those joints and opening them up and extending them. So we get this preferential elongation in that formation where the joints are located. And then sand is also pumped in there along with that to then prop open those joints. Hydraulic fracturing is 4 stages, for different stages, a couple of 100 feet long, along this length individually that it's done, and that's where they're talking about 80,000 gallons per stage. We have over about 300 horizontal wells in the state of various nature. And according to our records, one has used 640,000 gallons in one of those horizontal wells for a hydraulic fracturing operation. Seismic monitoring that shows the extent of this fracturing that takes place with that. This is looking down on a mining plan, on the drilling operation. This is the borehole going down into the ground and then going horizontally. Little colored sections here are each of those individual stages. And a number of companies that do this work can put in deep boreholes and put in little very sensitive instruments to pick up these microseismic events. And where that little microseismic event is taking place is where the extension of those fracturing is taking place. So that's looking down. Now we're looking down in a cross section down into the earth this is the layer of interest that they're after. And you can see per stage is green here, is this green here. It's a couple of 100 feet up and down that this takes place. You only want to fracture in where the resource is. It's no use fracturing anything much outside of there. If you go outside of there and start bringing in water, you're flooding some of your operation. There's concerns associated with the hydraulic the fracturing fluid and water use. You've probably seen a lot of these. They are very specific to a well itself and the formation that you're working in. And this is the combination here is picked out by the hydraulic fracturing professional groups. And there's lists of what each one of those chemicals are used for in a hydraulic fracturing operation. Water use, you could look at the average. This is an average per day water use in the state of Illinois, where half a billion gallons are going out in the used in the agricultural, over 12 billion for our power generation. It is estimated, again, it's an estimate until things get going, but looking at other operations throughout the state, that these horizontal wells with hydraulic fracturing could be using 2 to 5 million gallons per well. That represents, in our county, where we are, the University of Illinois is located, that's about 1.5 hours of water use in our county. We could take a look at what some of the other operations, and this is, the Bakken, you've heard it in North Dakota, a lot of wells going in. They're talking about that they have about 2,000 wells per year going in. That's roughly about 5.5 completed per day. Again, on the average, they're using, on the average, 2 million gallons per well. That would be 11 million gallons of water per day in this area of extensive drilling. And that would really represent for Illinois, 2% of ag per day, or 0.6 of public water supply, or 0.008. But that's looking at, on a state basis. You have to look, regionally, kind of what's available, and probably issues will have to be dealt with at that time. Also, you're not just going and taking, 1 million gallons in a day. You're bringing it in stages and putting it in the tank, so it's not drawing out millions per day. After the hydraulic fracturing takes place, again, you're forcing the fluids into that formation. After the pressure is taken off, about 5 to 50% of that flowback water comes back out. Again, it varies per region and per formation. And many of the chemicals are consumed or absorbed by the rocks and not returned because they have a specific process you can see in that list. But the water coming out is rich in minerals and formations that are saline, brine content, with trace amounts of toxic metals and radioactive isotopes. Management of the flowback water is treated and disposed in deep disposal wells, treated and used in hydraulic fracturing in other wells. In Pennsylvania, some companies are running pipelines between their fields to run this to the next drill pad site. And reuse of water, such as this in Pennsylvania, has gone up to 90% is being reused in 2012. In North Dakota, where that Bakken formation is, the governor is urging companies to install pipeline systems to run the different various fluids around. In Illinois, the regulations require storage in tanks at the drill site and testing of these waters and proper disposal. Where are these unconventional resources that we're talking about in Illinois? You've probably seen for the whole United States, these red areas are where either it's oil or gas. You hear about the stuff in Pennsylvania, New York, the Marcellus Shale, that's gas. And we talked about the Bakken here in North Dakota, and that they're pulling oil out of there. Let's look a little closer in Illinois. Again, our oil and gas folks are telling us that this is speculation and uncertain model at this time. The outline of the New Albany Shale covers a large area, but you have to have a proper kind of, I call it cooking of that organic material, high enough temperatures to produce the oils and the gases and liberate them out of that black organic material. And our folks are looking at the possibility that this purple line running around through here is where we start to see some of the shale oils developed in that formation. And the orange here, areas that are deeper and been cooked a little bit more, having more intense oil generation. And this would be the deepest and highest mature area. And that's been running from about depth of about 2,000 feet here, down about 5,000 feet down in this area. And there's a side note, this is the New Albany Black Shale. 90% of our oil in the state is believed that it came out of this formation and floated up into the other reservoirs. So this is kind of the original source rock, where oil and gas drilling is now has been going on for decades, up higher above this type of formation. There was a concern in several cases with seismicity. Again, we talked about picking up that little microseismic events for opening the fractures. It falls in a magnitude of a -4 to a -2. And they're only detected by these instruments that are put deep down in boreholes near the operation. They're not felt at the surface, and they're not at a damaging level. And again, there's been over 1 million of these hydraulically fractured sections in horizontal wells in Illinois, and there have been no felt seismic events associated with those. The Richter scale is open in both directions. That's why we could talk about a negative magnitude. And really, it's just a measure of energy released. And we start to feel, from natural earthquakes, we start to feel things when we get to about magnitude 2 and into the low 3s. Damage from natural earthquakes start at the upper 4s and right about 5, and we're talking about just kind of brickwork coming down off of structures with that type of magnitude. Earthquakes detection in the state is by the U.S. Geological Survey and the permanent seismographs, and they could see seismic events from about 1.5 into the low 2s is kind of the threshold when they could see these and locate them in 3 dimension. The largest earthquakes recorded in Illinois have been right around a 5.3 range. Hydraulic fracturing is down here in this -2 to -4. And the scale is, it's really going from 1 to a 2. It's an increase of 32.6 times the amount of energy released. So it's a strange scale, but going from the felt down to this area, that's 1 million times less energy released associated down in the hydraulic fracturing. And from a damaging level to there, it's like 31 billion times. But that doesn't give you that good of a handle. Let's look at what it is kind of associated with, what things that you might be familiar with that fall on this scale. If you're familiar with M80s or cherry bombs, which have been illegal since the mid-60s, but this one you may have used in the 4th of July. This is one of those little tiny, got the pencil diameter firecrackers. This is the amount of energy released in association with the hydraulic fracturing. And really looking in the middle of the hydraulic fracturing at a -3, that's the amount of energy released when an apple dropped. And it's really a small to medium-sized apple that's dropped from about 3 feet above the floor and at hitting the floor. That's the energy released for a magnitude 3. There's been a publication by the National Research Council, that's the National Academy of Sciences, that came out early last year that looked at induced seismicity potential in energy technology. And they looked at hydraulic fracturing, and as they said, as hydraulic fracturing is being implemented in our wells today, it does not pose a high risk for even having a felt seismic event. But there have been 2 seismic felt events in the world associated with hydraulic fracturing and horizontal wells. One was in Blackpool, England in April of 2001. This was a magnitude 2.3 earthquake. And what transpired is the water pressures at the time of hydraulic fracturing. First of all, there's water already down there, so the whole body of rock has water. And what you're doing is you're increasing the pressures with water, and there's a pressure wave that can go out into the body of water that's in the fractures and in the formations. So that pressure wave could go out, and if it intercepts a fault, and it's not just any fault, it would have to be a fault that is properly oriented so that the stresses in the earth are already trying to make it slide past each other, and with the pressure increase in water in that fault plane could move them apart. And that reduces the friction, and then you could have a slippage take place. And that's what took place in this particular setting. Now, the ideal situation with the hydraulic fracturing is you're only pressuring up for a momentary time period, from hours to part of a day. So that can only take place during that time or a little bit after because the pressure comes back off. So you don't see activity later on after the pressuring process. Another one was up in the northeast corner of British Columbia where the workers felt a 3.8 magnitude event. Seismographs in the area did pick up other ones, 38 other ones from a 2.2 to a 3.8 in that area. But they were doing hydraulic fracturing in wells that were in a faulted zone. In fact, some of the horizontal wells went through the fault zones themselves. But they also had 1,000 other hydraulically fractured segments up in that area with no felt seismic activity. With hydraulic fracturing, where we trigger natural earthquakes, down in southern part of the state here, our drinking water's up in the 50 to 200 foot range here. Our oil wells are in about the 2,000 to 5,000 foot, 2,000 to 500,000 foot depth. And our coal mines is deep about 900 to 1,000 feet. These are all the strata that we're familiar with: oil and gas, crushed rock. And our natural earthquakes are 7 to 10 miles down in this granite basement. That's where we encounter them throughout all of the state of Illinois. So the hydraulic fracturing is miles and miles above where the natural earthquakes take place. And again, in hydraulic fracturing, the pressure up is only momentary. It's not long term. There have been felt seismic events from vertical wells. In Oklahoma, they've had that several different times. There's vertical wells and hydraulic fracturing associated with that. And up in Canada and British Columbia, they had 29 events in this 10-year time period. So they can be associated with just the vertical wells, which we have not felt or had them recorded here in the state of Illinois with all of the vertical wells. Groundwater contamination. There have been a lot of studies that have taken place in different parts of the United States. And it's, if you're looking in different parts of the United States, such as in the eastern United States, just also remember that those are different geological settings also. The bedrock there is broken up by mountain building for the Appalachian Mountains. We don't have that type of situation here. So we do have different geological settings in many of these different areas. People have heard a lot about the Dimmock, Pennsylvania, where folks are concerned about methane in their water, and also they're concerned about if hydraulic fracturing was contaminating their water. The US EPA went in and sampled the wells and at the faucets at 64 homes in this community. The water was sampled and analyzed for 195 constituents. They found levels that exceeded the primary maximum contamination levels for public water supply in 5 of the wells. 3 of them had coliform. 1 of those was fecal coliform, barium, and arsenic. Barium and arsenic are in the groundwater and do come out of the bedrock naturally out east. These are mostly considered naturally occurring substances outside of the fecal coliform. And the US EPA worked with the homeowners to put in systems to take care of problems on their individual wells. There was another massive study done by Duke University in Pennsylvania through New York. 400 water samples of private wells and surface wells, and they're analyzed for hydrocarbons, isotopes, and radionuclide levels. And they found no saline brines or fracture fluids found in any other sampling. Their study also gets into methane and had some convoluted language associated with methane that they picked up. They found methane in some wells near the well drain operation. Other wells nearby they didn't, and in wells that were more than a kilometer away, about 0.6 miles away from any of the drilling wells, they felt was natural methane. This is again talking about a geological setting. Methane is prevalent throughout the eastern United States, coming out of multiple shale layers, not just the Marcellus shales. This is just looking at methane concentrations in groundwater in the state of New York. And some of this could be natural or methane from degrading organic material that is down. And we have lots of those areas in the state of Illinois and northern part of the state. And primarily the shale that's close to the ground surface in this area, very close to the ground surface in the area, has methane coming out of it. French explorers in 1626 were finding that the Native Americans were lighting fires on Lake Erie and also lighting it on the ground from these methanes coming out. The first natural gas distribution was from a dug well in western New York. And you could also go out there and find what's called eternal flames, where you have fires coming from the gas coming out of, in this particular case, some shale layers much higher up in a sequence, and that related to the Marcellus shale. Some of the isotope work can distinguish where the methane comes from. This is why it's important really to have pre and post testing of sites, because you get a better picture of what's there naturally before the drilling and what possibly has occurred associated with the drilling. And there's been a number of studies associated with that kind of take out that questioning of is methane there at a time or not. So in this particular case, there was no difference found in methane in 47 wells within 250 feet of gas wells. One well had an increase, and they were attributing that to a casing leak. And again, there's 1 to 3% possibility of some problems with the sealing of a casing. Water chemistry and 233 rural water were tested, where they had information ahead of time, and there was no influence seen in comparison to pre-existing data. And one of those, they saw the salt content go up, but it didn't exceed any standards. And then they saw that salt content go back down within 10 months, and they're questioning as to what took place associated with that, because it was only just a salt. Pre and post drilling in Arkansas, there's a couple of counties that are doing a lot of horizontal drilling and gas extraction. The U.S. Geological Survey had already sampled in that area in 2 counties, in 127 domestic water wells. 7 samples had high methane, but the isotope showed that it was really from organic material that was degrading, and it's not associated with the shale gas. And the other chemistry showed links of the other chemistry was associated with the 2 types of bedrock that were in that area, and not from the drilling operation. Also, US EPA found one well in West Virginia with a gelling agent, so that did come up from a hydraulic fracturing operation. And it was believed that it came up, there was a couple of old gas wells nearby, and they thought that was the avenue. Illinois regulation has the drillers plug these old wells along that horizontal length for the hydraulic fracturing that takes place. And Illinois requires a pre and post drilling testing of the lakes, rivers, and groundwater to wells, and this is the first, and you've already heard this is the first in the nation. They're always, we're trying to keep our eyes out for additional studies that are taking place. The EPA is doing another one across a number of states in Colorado, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, and in Texas. This was a progress report last December. It didn't have any testing results. But there should be a final one coming out on this. Kind of in summary, hydraulic fracturing has been practiced since 1947. Adapting hydraulic fracturing to horizontal shale gas wells began 30 years ago, but expanded in the last decade. Tens of thousands of vertical wells have been hydraulically fractured in Illinois for oil and gas production already. There's been estimated that over 1 million hydraulically fractured sections and horizontal wells have taken place with no seismic events felt associated with those in the United States. There's only been 2 felt in the world. Many studies have been performed on the possible contamination, and really the best comparison is where you have pre and post drilling tests are performed near the operations. Hydraulic fracturing is occurring many, many miles above where our natural earthquakes are taking place in our crystalline basement rocks in the state of Illinois. These unconventional resources of shale oil and gas in Illinois are really they're not certain. Horizontal wells and hydraulic fracturing is and can be used for conventional oil and gas resources and other type formations that are not shale or the New Albany Shale in our state. And this is going on already and has been going on. So that's kind of a summary associated with what we see across the United States and the world for some instances for seismicity. We are working with the Department of Natural Resources on other seismicity issues, and that's where people, you heard in the press that there have been some earthquakes in like Ohio and Arkansas, and those are not associated with hydraulic fracturing. In many cases that's rolled into these articles that say it's associated with water disposal in deep wells, and that's also contained in this legislation. we'll be working on standards and operating standards associated with this deep well disposal. Thank you very much.
You're watching the Illinois Channel.